There we go. All right. Hello and welcome to Corner Comics, your mostly comic book reading club. Mostly comic book reading club. I've really messed that up this week. Your mostly weekly comic book reading club. My friends and I get together. We pick a few issues. We share those issues. Then we talk about those issues. Gentlemen, it's Sunday again. It's close to 9 a.m. We had a technical hiccup, but we resolved it. How are y'all doing? And where can people find you on the interwebs?
I am fucking fine.
Well, I
It's
hope
random
you
squirt.
I hope you don't do it poorly. So that's good to know.
I'm fine with my fucks.
Okay.
You can find me at emmanuelthestory.com. Also, you can find me on Instagram at EM_MAN_YOU_EL. Phonetically, Emmanuel. You can also find me at cornercomics.net. See you there.
Well, I'm doing fair to Midland today, but am looking at changing it to amazing and awesome. So hopefully this podcast will get me to that point. I'm Walrus. You can find me on Twitter at Walrus. It's at WALLRUSS. You can also find me at blacksuperherofan.com. Also at comiccreatorsofcolor.com. .net. Can't remember for that one. But you can always find me here at cornercomics.net.
All right. We've got 6 issues this week, 2 from each of us again. I picked a theme. So the Eisner Awards are out for 2020, and I decided that'd be kind of a
And
cool...
what are the Eisner Awards, sir?
The Eisner Awards, I'm probably going to mess up the definition. Basically, they're comic book awards, but they're given for basically outstanding writing, outstanding art in graphic novel and comic book medium. So I thought it would be good to maybe pull a couple of those issues in, and then maybe at the back half of the show we could highlight some of the stuff that got nominated and won. So my 2 books this week also will be free books for people to download and check out. Our favorite thing is My Favorite Thing is Monsters. That is the title of the first book that I have. And my second pick is Pretty Deadly, number 1. Russ, what are you bringing?
Oh, what am I bringing? Awesomeness and amazingness. That's what I'm bringing. But if you want more specifics, I'm bringing 2 comic books. The first one is Commanders in Crisis, number 1. It's an Image book. And the second book is our Mighty Marvel, The Avengers, version 8, number 39, the most recent. And it's sort of a standalone. It's kind of a standalone story, but also part of the bigger thing. But it's something you don't have to have a background. You could just read it and enjoy.
Yeah. Emmanuel?
Nice. My first issue is Spawn, number 299, the 2019 issue, and it is an Image book. My second issue is Twilight Zone, volume 5, issue number 12, and that was out in 2015. Give me a moment while I search for the company. Dynamic Entertainment.
Dynamite.
Dynamite.
Yeah, Dynamite Entertainment. That is the company that put it out. So those are my 2 issues.
All right. We should just jump right into it, unless you got
Before we start, I got something in the notes. If you could take a look at the chat for a hot minute, and then we can go in.
look, the chat for Zoom.
Yes. Sorry to interrupt, but I thought it was worthy of bringing up.
Yeah, from what I can tell, we are live on Zoom or on Twitch.
Okay, good enough. I just didn't see it. I looking now and I didn't see it's there. All right, moving on. Please, I'm sorry for interrupting. Please
No
continue,
worries.
sir.
If we had started and did the whole intro and we weren't live,
Yes,
I
I
wouldn't
thought
be
it's
mad. I wouldn't be mad about it because I messed up the intro and we've all been kind of fumbling around a little bit.
okay.
Yeah.
Then that's good.
So I would not have been mad if it was not live and we could have reset. But according to what I could see, we are live. So we'll just keep going with it.
All right, confirmed.
All right. So my first book. My favorite thing is monsters. This is the Free Comic Book Day one. The reason I chose this particular issue is because it is the size of a normal issue. The other stuff that she's put out is graphic novels, and they are graphic novel in length. I didn't necessarily think that all of us here would get into the types of stories that are being told in these books, but could all appreciate the artistry that did go into it. So that being said, what did you guys think of the Free Comic Book Day version of this?
The art right out the gate is fantastic. It reminds me of being in school and leaning over, seeing a friend of mine drawing and being impressed by his or her drawings and wanting to see more. So this is amazing. The stories themselves, it has taken me a while to wrap my head around them. They're kind of jumping from story to story. I don't think there's a solid cohesion between the stories, but it's still entertaining. The mental or the writer experienced like some sort of physical, I don't know, just something happened to her. I think she got hit by a car or something like that. I can't recall, but she broke down physically.
West Nile virus.
West Nile virus, yes, right. She got bitten by a mosquito and completely debilitated her. And she is an artist, so she couldn't really write. But then it was a story of how she got back to where she is now. That was entertaining to see somebody's peril, to see somebody's challenge, and to go on that ride with her. That was good. Visually, super stunning. Also, there's like another subsequent story about night walkers and maybe telepathy, streetwalkers and telepathy, and maybe like religion. It was weird. It was hard to follow, but it was still entertaining because you can see these. It's the way her mind works. You can see it in picture form, which is always entertaining. If she would just tell this story outright, it would be difficult to visualize what she's talking about. But her writings help aid the story, which I appreciate. In my mind, it's more of a verbal story than a visual story, and her writings just aid in that. So I would give this a solid read simply because I don't see myself buying this book or buying this issue, even though it's a free comic. But if it were on the stands, I wouldn't buy this. It would be appealing visually, and it's just weird. It's a weird book. I appreciate it for what it is, but it's weird.
Okay. So here's my take. What I like about this book is more the meta of it than the actual book.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good way to put it.
I like what the writer had to go through in order to make this book possible. I like that this art is on lined paper because that's what she had at the time, in theory, and that's all when she was going through whatever she went through. So that of it is very appealing, and this is good art. This is not necessarily good comic book art, in a meaning conveying a story. I don't know that it does that well. It's more like Manny, what you said. If she was standing on stage, and telling this story, and there were PowerPoint images that were going along with her story, this would be perfect, right? Because it would lend credibility, it would flesh out her story. So if you say she's on stage and behind her is a huge screen, and she tells us this story, this personal, and these images come up, as she goes through it, that's a great presentation,
Yeah.
Right.
right? But not for a comic that you have in your hand and have to read. I think it suffers for that. The art itself, what she draws, how she draws, it's amazing. But I wouldn't say that it is drawn in a way that it forward moves the story forward. It's just more accentuating the verbal here, right?
Yeah.
Like, or the written. If it's a written story, like in like a book, a physical book you read, not a comic book that has occasional imagery, it will work in that medium. Is this a comic book you should own? No. The person is interesting, what she went through, what came out of her suffering and living, her life is very interesting. So for that, I give it a read. But is this like a comic book I would ever follow? No. If there is a second issue, would I read it? No. Right. But if she had some kind of, because again, the art doesn't move the story forward. It's just accentuating the verbal, I believe.
Yeah. I can agree with both of you on that front. So the award that it won was best single issue / one shot. Um, and so I think on that level it succeeds because it is worth just going through once, right? And then this, Free Comic Book Day version of it is a much more condensed version of what she put out. But yeah, in terms of like what you guys were saying, I totally agree. It's the words don't quite match up with what's actually happening on the page, you know. But yeah, there's some really like beautiful one page like
Yeah.
There are some gems here. Like I said, it's worth a read. I don't know if I would want a whole graphic novel of this though. I would prefer, like I said, give me a Netflix 20-minute special and let her talk and let these images show up.
it,
And I'd
w-
be like, yes, that shit is great.
it would be interesting to see what she could do interpreting somebody else's story. Like if somebody gave her a script and she were to draw it, I'm really curious to see what would come out of that.
Yeah, and I don't know because this is very personal. All this is
Right.
very personal stuff. So to get her to write or draw for someone else where she doesn't have that personal experience to draw from, right? Because some of these characters also speak to not what they actually look like, but what they felt like to her,
Right.
Right.
right?
If she
There's
was just
teeth.
doing a TED talk
Hmm.
on it, and maybe the ending subject was "This is my life," this would be great.
Yes. But as a, you should read this comic, it's worth the read. And it's free, so why wouldn't you, right?
Yeah.
But it's not something that I would say, like, I applaud her effort and what she went through and what she created,
Mhm.
but I'm not someone who's going to follow her comic books.
That's fair. All right. Any final thoughts on that issue then?
Say it
Okay.
all.
Moving on, my second pick, Pretty Deadly. This is the first issue. This is by Image Comics. This was originally put out in 2013. Um, it's an ongoing series, and this year it won for best cover, I believe. I'm scrolling through the award winners right now. I want to say it's best covers or best cover of the year was Pretty Deadly. I picked this particular issue just because it's issue number one. It's a jumping on point. It's also free on Image Comics. It's free on Comixology. Um, I figure it's a nice chance to see an example of what won. Um, so this is a sort of a fantasy sci-fi spaghetti western. You don't really quite know what's real, what's not. You follow a blind gunslinger and a little girl. It's kind of all over the place. I did get into this originally. I have a bunch of the issues in my box. What did you guys think of this?
It's dark. It's dark, and I like it. I've always seen this comic and said to myself, yeah, that's worth getting into. It looks visually stunning, at least on the cover itself. But thank you, Matt, for choosing this because now it gives me a reason and opportunity to read it. It it surprised me in its storytelling. I was captivated from like the narration, and it was taken from the first narrated words were taken from like a butterfly and a bunny rabbit. So I'm already hooked. This was interesting, embodying death. I like it. Um, Looking at it visually, the panels themselves don't do the story as much justice. There are some very, very good panels, but I think the story shines greater than the art itself. Um, I'd say this is definitely worth another read. I would look at subsequent issues and read them and be as entertained, I hope. But this has captivated me. I'm definitely gonna start reading Pretty Deadly on a more consistent basis.
I didn't like it.
You didn't.
Let's start with that.
You didn't like
I
the.
like the cover, and the cover made me think I would like it just on the cover alone.
Okay.
Uh, uh, there was something you said, Matt, about it's kind of all over the place. It is kind of all over the place. Not I'm talking story wise. It's like, okay, are we esoteric? Are we in reality? And I feel like it jumps with no clear letting you know where you are or where you're trying to get to. There are parts of it that are nice and succinct for that part,
Yeah.
and then I'm lost again. Like, where are we going? What's this about? I thought this was the protagonist. Now this person is. I what you know. And so I I didn't like that. There were parts of it that were good, but I didn't like that it wasn't. I didn't feel like a cohesive story. Second, I think the art made it worse.
Really. Okay.
I think that if you had better art, I would have followed it better. But the art is at sometimes just not appealing, sometimes not clear. There are panels that you could just totally skip that you don't even really need to see. That you know what I mean, except for holding the word bubbles. There's things in the panels, but they're not moving you forward. They're just there, maybe to give you atmosphere. But the I don't feel like the art, there are parts of it where it moves you forward, and there are parts where you got a guy whose foot is on the wall, and you see something in the background, and nothing. If that wasn't there, I would not have missed anything, right? And there's certain part, and then it's just some of the art is not clear what's happening in it. It's not clear what these things are. This is not to say the art is terrible. It's just not. It doesn't service the story well. It's
Okay.
it the story is already kind of all over the place, but I'm open to that. But the art didn't say, hey, while you're working out where you are, where this is going, here's some great visuals. No, didn't really provide that. So as a whole story, because I don't know, first we're esoteric, first we're reality, and we're not. I don't know if someone's telling something in the past, in the future,
Yeah.
right? And it just hops all over and does its thing, right? And that's normally I can be open to that, but I need something to say. I need someone to follow, something that interests me to go to the next issue. And this was work to get through,
Okay.
right? It was actually some work to walk away with something. It's not like I didn't want to read it as, okay, let me just look through it, flip through it, and be gone. I wanted to follow and find it and find the silver lining, find the gold and follow it. And I couldn't because every time I thought I found something, it shook me, either with the art or with going somewhere else with the story, different on the timeline or whatever. So I didn't find it to be a cohesive story that could keep me on track and enjoying it. And I didn't find that the art, because sometimes the art can get you through those rough spots, and I
Right.
don't think the art did it. In fact, sometimes the art was distracting in a bad way. Like, what is this thing he's trying to draw here?
Okay.
Right? Like when the bird was flying, I don't know if it was a bird or a human being and a bird flying through the town. That was not clear what the heck that was until later on, right? A few panels I had to go through. And is this an actual condor, an eagle, a person? What's happening here? Right? Saying call, I don't know. Right? I should know. Right? And if I see a second panel, if I didn't know the first panel, the second panel should make clear. But no.
Okay.
So I'm going to give it a pass for that reason.
Okay. Yeah, I would say it's a series of like mood vignettes. So they're all loosely tied together, and it's the story overall is told, I guess, similar to like Game of Thrones, where you've got 30, 40 characters that are all introduced, and you just sort of there are bits and pieces where you follow like these different characters, but if you if you don't take time or like Game of Thrones, the book was hard for me to get through because the show was like, who the fuck is that person? Oh, they were in season one, episode two, and we're on season five or whatever. Like um, so I think that this is a similar way to tell a story, and it's probably more clear to the writer or the author of
Hmm.
like all I have this all in my head. I know where all the pieces fit. You can piece it together as a reader, but it is
Take some work.
yeah, it's scattered throughout the books for sure. Um, all right. Any final thoughts on this then?
I would say that kind of storytelling is sometimes meaningful. There's a certain joy in putting the puzzle pieces together later on. But then if done improperly, it's like I don't want to do this puzzle. It's just kind of scattered. I don't have the wherewithal, or not wherewithal. I don't have it within me, the vested interest to connect these puzzle pieces. Do it for me, or else just go to the next story.
Yeah, so I shored myself up to get the wherewithal to put the pieces together,
Mm,
and I found that what I got was not worth the value of my effort for me.
understandable. Perfectly understandable.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. We'll move on then. Russ, your first book.
My first book is an image book. If I notice I do a lot of image books, maybe because they're kind of all over the place. This is Commanders in Crisis. And I've been reading about this book prior, so I said, okay, let me give it a shot. And there's a multiverse thing going on here. There's a few things, but before I spoil it, tell me what you guys thought.
All right, I'll go first.
And be brutal. Tell me the truth.
I think I was fairly I sort of got into it in the notes, just with one line. So cheesy, but I did enjoy it. Um, so the artwork is amazing. I love this style. All of the character designs are really cool. What it does visually works for me. This feels like a classic image book in a way, but the everything about this is just so damn cheesy, and it's like one big dad joke. Um,
I like that.
it is. It's one giant dad joke. If you're into that, like if you can get into that aspect of it, there is some interesting themes that go on about just superheroes in relation to the state and what their position is and that kind of stuff. Um, but it's not told in the same way as another book that we had on the show, Jupiter's Legacy, which I'll have to find the episode that we talked about that so we can link it in the show notes. But it has similar themes to that book, but yeah, it's just done in a way that I'm trying to find the. There's a panel in particular where the Hawkeye sniper character walks into a hospital room,
Mm.
and they're like, "You can't bring a rifle into this hospital," and he's like, "It's a sniper rifle, a surgical one, but you're not looking in the right place." Like, just there's dialogue like that throughout the entire freaking issue, and I'm assuming it continues the whole series. Um, so yeah, if you're into that, I say it's a read. This might be a good graphic novel to have. This is like a good coffee table book. This is one that you like put on the coffee table. People are like, I've never heard of this. I've never seen these heroes before, and they flip through, and you can find like just panels like that that sort of jump out and work. Overall, yeah, it's a read. I'd say the graphic novel is a buy for a coffee table.
Great. I I'd have to say I like the art. It's very, very reminiscent of Invincible, which is one of my favorite comic books ever. Also, what really stands out to me, the saving grace of this comic, are the different powers of the characters.
Yeah.
They're very original. You have an action surgeon, somebody that's in the field that can see what is wrong. They can see X-ray eyes, and they can see the malady of a person and either use that to their advantage in taking them out or use that to their advantage in healing them, which is great. You have the quintessential strong man, which is pretty normal, but also a character that invokes vocabulary and alters reality. That was interesting. That really stood out to me. You have a quantum god that can manipulate the quantum energy 1 minute at a time. Just these imaginative powers, I really, really appreciate it. I want to invest more in these characters. I want to have a connection to them, but I don't think this story actually brought that through. It did highlight the different characters, the different heroes, in a very small way, but not enough for me to actually care about them enough to read the next issue. And the fact that they're all presidents from their respective worlds, I think that's a bit much. Like everyone's a president. Come on.
Commanders in crisis.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so I'm sorry.
And
Please
instead of
continue.
the Hall of Justice, it's the think tank.
I see the theme. I see the theme, but I think that would fly better in like the 90s. Commanders, Injustice,
I
like
mean,
just
that's kind of why I like it. I think um, it does have a classic image feel, and that is '90s. That's early '90s. You know.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I get the appeal, but I don't really. Just the
so
saving grace for me is the powers.
so what I because we've done a few of these. This is a crisis of infinite Earths, and we've had a few books like this over the
Mhm.
last few weeks, right? So this is a crisis on infinite Earths, and the person that is pulling people from infinite Earths is not the monitor, sees a president, right? So in order to solve these problems, she's a president. She pulls
Mhm.
out other presidents from other dying universes because they know how to handle things on a larger scale, right? So, and the crucible of bringing them to this world empowers each of them, right? So whatever has to happen to how they brought into the world, they gain some sort of superpower, right? So it makes sense that the person bringing them in say, well, I can't just pick a regular dude because a regular dude is not going to figure out how to solve these problems. I need someone that thinks on a certain level, right? And she didn't pick the bad presidents; she picked the good ones. What's very interesting is, except for the one that brought them, each of them is a minority in their universe, right? Whether it be because one is gay, because one is black, because one is Asian, because one is Indian. Each of them is has a unique perspective on the world because of where they come from, and but have a similar viewpoint of having to run the nation, right?
Yeah.
So I thought the idea of what happens if you put these people together and you empower them to solve problems. Remember a book I brought a ways back called On the Stump, in
Yeah.
which you have to, in order to win something in the house, you got to actually beat somebody,
Mhm.
right? Like if our president had to fight and prove that his stuff was worth it, I might actually be behind him, right? If
Yeah.
he kicked Biden's ass physically, I'm like, well, shit, okay. I'm gonna let your foolishness pass, right? But so the idea, so there's that. I did like the art and the cheesiness. I also liked that all their powers are sort of esoteric. Like the guy that's a strongman, the prize fighter, he's only as strong as people think he is. So he has to keep doing things in public, right? So
Mhm.
and so it's not like everyone has a straight superpower. Their power is really in relation to something else that they can't control. And I thought that was very much a president thing to do, right? So all presidents, good art, a power that they don't control, they will never be able to control fully, that they have to sort of be in service to the power.
Yeah.
I thought that was very interesting. So I like the potential of the book. I like the art. I did read issue number 2, where a lot more is explained. But I like the multiverse, new powers, but not normally when you have a multiverse, you get somebody who has a very clear power. I shoot arrows, I have super strength, I have super speed, and I can do these things. And you can already see how they will solve problems, right? But now you're looking at commanders in chief who think about the world differently and whose powers affect the world differently. And they have to solve that problem. And I like that someone came up with something that I didn't automatically see how it was going to get fixed and resolved. So I like what is possible here.
Mhm.
I thought it was worth at least a read for that and the art.
This is my final thought on this. This is the
Okay.
Peacock version of the Boys.
I like it. It's not a, yeah, it's Peacock, so it's not as violent, but there is some sort of, it's hard to say there's some reality to it because it's all so multiversal and all this other sort of stuff,
Yeah.
but maybe a little more grounded in real issues. Because, it's hard. Sometimes people preach real issues. They really just want to talk about their issues. They really don't want to talk about the world. And I worry that this book might be, well, we got a gay guy, we got a black person, we have a Latino person, we have all that, and really trying to push that issue more than the actual story.
Yeah.
And I feel like they were not heavy handed with, except maybe the guy who was gay. I think they put a lot of extra scenes with him showing that. But with the rest, not so much. So I thought it was interesting. I thought it has potential, and I thought it would, whatever they have to fight, how it's resolved is not something that gets resolved in the traditional way of a universe or multiverse in the Marvel or DC. So
In addition to the powers being unique, I think the technology is unique as well. Technology, and then at the end, like the mystery, the murder mystery, they killed empathy. That is all interesting. It's intriguing. So yeah,
so
you kind of
amazing.
swayed me a bit more to like it more, but I'm still not reading the subsequent issue.
All right, done
Yeah.
and done. And you, Matt, you're just gonna, you're done with this one. Bypass a read. Read.
Read. Yeah, it's a read.
All right. Moving on to my second book, Avengers, Volume 8, number 39. It's the most recent Avengers book. I haven't picked an Avengers book in a while, but the last one I picked was similar in this, and that it really told one story. That only at the end did it go into the greater story of what's happening in the series, but it got you through one story. The question is, was that story entertaining enough? You say what?
So the story itself, yes. Um, I think the implications for the greater Marvel universe and sort of what this retcons or what this could potentially retcon um, is more what's intriguing about this because the Phoenix Force has always been seen as this cosmic entity, but now based on this, it's like it could have an earthly origin and may have gone off into space at some point in time and has come back to Earth, and that's sort of where we know the Phoenix from is after it's come back to Earth, I guess, to inhabit Jean Grey. But yeah, no, this was kind of cool. Jason Aaron's really, he's really into the whole primal origins of all of these powers, right? He seems to be going back to it a lot this run of Avengers. So I thought this was kind of cool. It gives some early mutants, um, and I don't know how that falls into. I mean, they must have like roundtable meetings at Marvel, right? Like Jason Hickman has to know about this. So how does this tie into what he's doing in the X verse or with the new X books? And I don't know. All that stuff is really interesting to me. I don't know how where they're going to take it or what they're going to do with it, but I think that this lays the foundation for some really good stories later on.
And the
Um,
art?
the artwork was good. I mean, it's been pretty consistent through this run of the Avengers. So I would say this is. I'd say it's a pass because there's a lot of fluff. But what it does overall for the Marvel universe is kind of interesting, and I'm curious to see what springs off of this, like what stories are sort of taken from this particular book.
Nice. So the Phoenix Force, much like Peter Parker, Scott Summers, and Wolverine, just having this affinity for redheads, apparently.
This is true.
Apparently, like just that the white woman with red hair that's
But
just very attractive to the Phoenix.
what if your affinity to the Phoenix Force makes your hair red?
Yeah, I guess we haven't seen it in anyone else other than a white woman. Maybe if it were in like another nationality, another gender, I'd be inclined to have that conversation.
Technically not true. I'm going to cut you off right there because
Okay.
the Phoenix Force inhabits virtually everybody in the X-Men in the Avengers versus X-Men run.
But the ones they come back to is the redheads.
Yeah, not everybody.
They may bounce around. So let me try some other cats.
Right.
Like, no, you know what? My flavor is red.
Yeah, and in that the Phoenix Force ended up breaking everybody's powers and yeah.
But it doesn't do that for redheads.
Right, it doesn't do that for redheads. This is true.
So it reminds me a lot of the Savage Avengers. Just the way the story is told in that way too. Not only because it's like caveman era, but it has a similar feel with the narration. I like this story. I even like the cast that all died. You know, shocker there. The cast of mutants that all perished this one issue. There's some potential there, albeit they're all dead, so nothing's gonna come about them. But this was interesting. I liked this issue. The story that was told captivated my interest. I do have a question though. In the panel, was the little girl going to kill the Cyclops baby? Was that her intention? I was kind of unclear about that. She has a stone and a dagger. I don't know if she was going to protect the little baby, the Cyclops baby, or what. But you have Professor X character floating in saying, "Don't harm him." So maybe her intention was to just put it out of this misery.
She was raised by wolves, dude. She ain't really got a lot of. She's a little girl who's raised by wolves, and you expect her to just, well, you know what? This is another human, and I should have compassion. No, where's she going to learn that? So yes, without knowing what it was, without seeing the threat, she was prepared to destroy it before she saw it. Yes, you're supposed to be prepared to destroy any threat, and then when you see the threat, you can decide whether or not to use your power to end life. Yes. She was going to. She wasn't cityfied. She was, she was a wolf.
I understand the wolves show compassion to her, so there is some empathy there.
But there is something about the wolves that because first of all, she wasn't a threat. So that's one thing. Well, she was chasing something that appeared from her to be a threat, from her viewpoint, and so she came at it prepared to fight a threat, finding that instead there was not one. Okay. So. But when the wolves came to this little girl, they didn't see her as a threat.
She saw the little baby as a threat?
Well, the wolves didn't see a little baby as a threat, so they fostered it. All right?
I'm saying.
But she did. She was, before she came up on the little baby, she was already armed, meaning there was a threat she was running towards. So it makes sense that, so she was armed to kill before she saw the baby.
Right.
Right?
I think her intent
and then when she saw the baby, she thought about it, and then someone asked her not to kill it. Doesn't mean she was ever going to kill it, but she was armed to fight a threat. The panel right before that, she's running to fight a threat. She's got a stick and a stone to fight whatever threat it is, and I'm ready, right? So of course, and then come find out, oh, it's Cyclops. I guess I won't hurt him. So yes. So here's my thought. As a one-off book, I thought this was an interesting book. If you don't need it to tie into the other universe, sometimes just one story. I thought this one story was interesting enough.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you get certain character, just you're telling one story. It's like Firebrand or Sarbrand or something. You just tell the story of this character. I thought that was interesting, how she came to be, how she came to think the way she thinks, how she learned about the world. And I thought the art was good. So I felt like, in and of itself, whether it connected to the rest of the universe, I thought this was an interesting book on its own, like a standalone. Just
Mhm.
read and enjoy it. You don't have to know anything about Phoenix. You don't have to know anything about Avengers to enjoy this book. It's anyone can jump in and read, and I thought there was value here in that respect. If you require it to be part of a larger story, that is there, but it's not necessary,
No,
right?
it's not. I think to what you're saying though too. A lot of what happens in this story could be like one or two panels in another book. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like it's totally not required at all. Like this could have been.
Well, I don't know that I agree. I When you say not required at all, for what you got, what you gleaned from it is only worth a little bit. But I'm saying it's like watching an animated series. If you tell the story, you can tell the story in two panels,
Yeah.
but this is still a fully fleshed out story of a particular character from just after birth to adulthood. So I don't. I understand why maybe you didn't care about all those little parts that made that up. However, I think it's still a good fleshed out story in that respect. Now, I don't think it's about what you're supposed to get in this story, but more about enjoying this being told to you and just letting it roll with that. So, in that respect, because I can say that for that previous book that I didn't like, there's a bunch of stuff that didn't need to be there,
Yeah.
but art and story that just didn't need to be there, but it was there, and so I don't fault the book for having stuff that doesn't need to be there. I just figured there's a reason, then there's a story to unfold and to sort of just enjoy it. So I hear what you're saying that they only needed to do this in a few panels, but I think that as a fully fleshed out story, I think every panel counts. The imagery, the things that make you care, what happens when she sees things, the God rays coming through I think all of that matters to tell that story. If you had no knowledge of Avengers and no knowledge of X-Men, this is a decent story,
That's true. Yeah.
right? So that is sort of my point. Now, what it means to the greater Marvel universe, that may only be a little bit.
Right.
But this book by itself, whether or not you may not be deep into comics, you may not be, but there's a good story here, I think, and it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But if you have a little bit of affinity for, say, X-Men, there's something in there for you. If you have a
Yeah,
little bit of affinity for Thor, there's something extra in there for you.
right.
I found it very interesting to see that Thor's father couldn't lift Mjolnir.
See,
That
yeah,
was
that's what
like
I
an
Yeah.
was about to bring
incredible,
up.
Yeah.
right?
At the end.
Right.
Yeah.
So, right. So and then how she showed up to meet him, and I thought the colors, especially when she turned full Phoenix, and what she did with the power and how she resisted it, using it all to burn the world down as a child was important. And the fact that she learned something from the wolves, which enabled her to resist the full power of it, was important. So I thought all of that made for a, like, say this book wasn't Avengers book, say it was just Caveman Phoenix #1. I think this is a full and complete book in that respect,
Yeah.
with
That's
some
fair.
extra Easter eggs for other people who wanted to be part of Marvel Avengers and X-Men proper. And I'm not trying to discount, because what you say makes sense. That what was important to you, what could it just been in a passing panel, but it may not have garnered that emotion. And I'm also trying to reach out to people who may not be following this story, right? As a writer, to sort of get you on board. Maybe you didn't see those other few issues. We have Caveman, Black Panther, and Caveman, right? Because if you notice, there's been an issue with a Caveman version of all of these characters. There was a Caveman Hulk, there was the Caveman, all of those. This is
Right.
the Caveman Phoenix.
Yeah. So I was gonna ask you, is some you're reading Avengers every month, right?
Yes.
How do you feel when it breaks from the like the modern day story and jumps to the because you've pulled these out, I think partially because they're standalone, but you do enjoy them, right? Even though it's a break from the
Yes.
overall story that's going on.
I enjoy them as sometimes you watch a TV show, right? And you're into a character and what they're going through. And then in the middle of an episode, they stop and say, 10 years ago. And they put 10, 20 minutes on something that happened 10 years ago that helps you in the present where you were.
Okay.
Right? That's actually good and interesting and worthy. Like, oh, I understand now, right? And now as things unfold with the character, you have a deeper understanding and a deeper connection, right? Because before it was just another Jean Grey. Now you kind of got a little more of who she is, which was, in some ways like Professor X, but much more savage because this is a savage Phoenix, right? And of
Right.
course, I love Savage. Anything Savage in it, I like. Savage Conan, Savage Avengers, Savage Dragon. I love Savage. Uh, uh, so, uh, uh, and looks like she's the leader. And that was another interesting thing at the end where she goes to Odin, but not to have Odin, but to basically lead Odin, which I
Yeah.
thought was interesting. Uh, 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 and Odin, who looks almost like an unworthy Thor, in that he can't lift Mjolnir, which I thought he created, which I thought automatically you got the Odin force, but maybe this is a part where he's still son of Bor,
Okay.
right? So all in that, I like the fact that they're basically telling the story of the cavemen Avengers, right? Which we've seen before, right? But never really got their story. But now we're learning more about the individual characters and the dynamics between them. Like if you look back at previous issues, Odin was kind of in love with the Phoenix. You know what I mean? During that time, right?
Well, I was gonna say, so there's multiple timelines going on, right? There's a far future Avengers, modern day Avengers, and then the past
Yeah, this is
Avengers.
This is the cavemen Avengers.
Are they doing any? Are they doing any single issues on the characters in the future? Has that happened yet?
Nope, not yet.
Uh,
Only what they're doing is some of the issues and things they fought are showing up in current Avengers stories. So
okay.
there's going to have to be a connection or a meeting, but you have to know the history of where it came from in order to see how the Avengers and if you'll notice, there's an Avengers story where Iron Man actually goes back into caveman days, right?
Yeah.
So there is a connection. There is moving forward. It's all part of a larger story. For me, I don't care if the larger story ever gets resolved or takes 20 years to do it. Just keep moving me forward,
Okay.
right? It's like a soap opera, right? Just keep moving me forward, and then tell me some more history, and then keep moving forward. As long as it does that, and it does it, and it looks good, because I really like the colors here,
Yeah.
then I'm happy, right? Because you really don't want a comic book to end. You kind of want it to just continue to be great and keep moving forward. Because it's sometimes anticlimactic once you get to the end, right? Oh, it's done. Okay, now what? Right? And then you got to gain your interest back in the new story, the new writers, right? I want the story to move forward always. And I feel like this does that well. And it does it when it looks good. And do you have to know all of this in order to enjoy the story? No. But here, I am the writer and the artist, and I've given you a visual piece of the story that looks good, that fleshes things out, and that gives you bits and pieces for the larger story moving forward.
Yeah.
So I feel like in that respect, it's worth a read at least. But my opinion.
And it also gives us something to look forward to because she not only says, well, Asgard is in trouble. That's why Odin is trying to get the Mjolnir. But the Phoenix Force is also saying that she's putting together a team to save the world from people like us. So she already knows that she herself is a threat, and maybe there's others out there as well. So that piques my interest.
Yep. I want to see the evil Avengers and the evil caveman brotherhood of evil mutants. What does that look like? Right? What is the by the way, what is the anti-Avengers team? What is that called? Like if you have a Justice League,
Cabal?
the Cabal, that's sort of new. Like what is the anti-Avengers? Uh uh you go back, Matt. What you go back way back. What is the anti-Avengers team? Is there one?
Um.
Because Cabal is recent, right? The Cabal is the last 5, 6 years.
Well, there's
Really.
there's the was it the Dark Avengers? The
Yeah, but
the
go back. Okay, and I feel you go back farther because Dark Avengers is still relatively new, right?
yeah, it's
Avengers
like
have been around 30,
2000s.
40 years before. Yeah, right. So before the 2000s, what was the anti-Avengers team called?
Oh,
Who did they fight? Like the UFOs? And that's my challenge. You don't have to have an answer, but I'm putting it out there, right? You should know if you're really a fan from way back, right?
Yeah.
Because if you ask me who the X-Men fought, You can tell me the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, right? They've always been there, right? You can tell me all these different things. Who, because the Avengers was brought together to fight a foe that no one hero could ever
Mm-hmm.
face,
A
right? I
threat
know
like
that's
no
written
other.
somewhere. I'm paraphrasing, right? So,
Right.
what is it that they fought prior to 2000 that required all of them?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look it
Was
up.
the recurring? Was it always Kang the Conqueror? Was it always what was it that made them all come together? Like there was a day like any other,
You realize
right?
this is gonna like
Mm.
force me to bring some really old book on the show.
Well, you were going to do that anyway. I just thought maybe I'd help direct it.
Yeah, you're the king of classics,
Yeah.
Kane.
So you were going there, and so that's not. But I challenge that out to you or to any of our readers or listeners.
Yeah.
Uh, who was it? Who were the anti? Because when you think the Justice League, who did they fight? Think Justice League. Who did they fight? There's the Injustice Gang. There's a whole bunch of. There's the Legion of Doom,
Yeah.
right?
That's the one that everybody knows.
Right, and Legion of Doom goes way back, actually, right? To Super Friends and before, right? And even Justice Society had the Injustice Society,
Right.
right? Who are the anti-Avengers? What are they called? Is it just one guy who brings them all together? Like, who is it with the Red Skull? Brings a whole bunch of heroes together and they fight. So it's really the Red Skullanites, or is it or is it the Frightful Four? Because the Fantastic Four had the Frightful Four, right? Who are the Avengers' true nemesis that goes beyond the Cabal? Anyway, I didn't mean to get off on a tangent, but I would. Uh, uh, so give me your bottom line on this book. Why Reader Pass? Both of you.
Definitely read. Like I said, I wouldn't have even known about this if you hadn't brought it. I'm really curious to see like if anybody takes anything from this book and goes with it. So it's a solid read.
Emmanuel?
Yeah, same here. I'm interested.
Okay. That's it for me. Emmanuel, what are you bringing?
All right, my first pick of the week is Spawn, 2099 issue number 2099, and it came out last year, 2019. Um, this, if you're at all familiar with Spawn, oh gosh, his name escapes me.
Al
Al
Simmons.
Simmons.
Al Simmons.
Al Simmons. Uh, I don't know a lot about Spawn besides the movie. Michael Jai White is my guy. I really, I've always been interested, but obviously not enough to get into the series. I definitely haven't read all 298 issues before this.
Shame on
So,
you.
this starts a new story arc. That's why I chose it. Of course, there's a lot of history that Spawn has with different characters. You don't necessarily need to know this to enjoy this issue because I don't know this. I don't know all the history, but I do know he has like his best friend, Mark, I think, that he rides with, and Mark knows his identity. Uh, Al Simmons has recently in the story come out and said, "Hey, look, there are secret organizations that are coming against the world, and the reason why your life is in shambles is because of them. They're not letting you be great." So, what do you guys think? I have some other things to say about this afterwards, but I want to get you guys' opinion.
So I am a Spawn fan, and I have not read all 313 issues that are out right now. But I have been back into it since issue 298 or so. And that was the road to 300.
Mhm.
It was a big milestone in comics in general because this is the first indie book to surpass 300 issues. I think Cerberus was the only other one, and it only had, I think, 299 issues. So hitting issue 300 for Spawn was a big deal. Um, this particular issue, um, I'm not a huge fan of Jason. What's his name? Jason Sean Alexander. I almost said Jason Aaron again.
Jason
Um,
Mewes.
right. I'm not a huge fan of his art, but the one thing that I do like is that Todd McFarlane has always been big on having this revolving door of artists come in and do his book, which says a lot because McFarlane, for all intents and purposes, could just do it himself. I mean, that's what he started as, was as an artist. Um, and it's his property. It's his, it's his baby. Like, he could just do it himself and maybe only put out one issue every 6 months, which is what happened for a while in the late 90s. um, but I think it's the art services the story pretty well. We do get to know a lot of other characters that have been recurring characters, like the Redeemer. You learn a little bit about some of the human companions that Al has made over the years. You're introduced to shoot, I forget what her name is. I think Jessica, the one with the red hair. She then becomes She Spawn in later issues, and that's sort of like the
Another red hair thing.
another red hair girl, red hair white girl. Um, so yeah, I think this is a good jumping on point for the current story arc, and it'll take you through a seminal event in comics history. Um, but yeah, I mean, I've been following Spawn. This is a buy for me because I've got it sitting in my box already.
Nice.
Okay, I really didn't like the art. It's like, here you have only charcoal crayons, and you're gonna have to make this whole thing, and so charcoal is bleeding out through everything, right?
Yeah.
It's like a lot of stuff is not defined that would be defined. A lot of things are just, well, I got a charcoal. I can only do so much. I can't really use a real fine-tooth pencil to tell you what's really happening. So I found that to be rather annoying. Not that I didn't recognize what was happening, right? So not that I didn't see what was happening and understand what was happening. Yes, it moved the story forward. So functionally, it worked. However, it was distracting, and for me, in its nondescript, extra charcoal all over the place art. That kind of took it down a notch for me. I don't know. Here's the thing: if you don't know Spawn, and kind of everybody knows Spawn, if you don't know Spawn, this just seems like another horror book.
Yeah, so I was gonna say the problems that you have with his artwork is the same stuff that I have, the same issues that I have, and he's a good horror artist.
Mm-hmm.
But this particular book and the lead up to 300 and even after is very much a return to the 90s Spawn. And since then, the artist has changed. So Jason Alexander's not doing Spawn anymore. And the art is more reflective of the tone now of the book. So this is like a transition period. I agree, his art doesn't quite fit the transition back to the 90s style. Um, so, but yeah.
Uh, and there's a lot here, right? There's a lot going on here. There are a lot of different players with a lot of different agendas that if this is your jumping on point, you don't really know enough. Really? I mean, you know what I mean? There's a lot of characters like, why are you even here? I see you have a goal, but I don't really know you, and I don't really know what you're trying to do. And by the end of the book, I still don't. But I know you're important. Otherwise, why would they put you in the panels, even if they did charcoal you up a little bit? Uh, uh, so I feel like there's a lot of loose ends, but these loose ends, these little story, these other characters, they're not. They don't appear to me to be compelling. Like when the red hair girl get together and talk about their stuff, I don't know if there's anything that happens there that I was like, ooh, I wonder what happens with them next issue, right? I don't feel like that part. It's like we got to let you know there's some parallel stuff happening, and here are the characters, and here's kind of what they're up to. But those parts weren't compelling, right? At the end was compelling. That last panel where you find out, and I'll leave it up to the reader who wants to read it, what he looks like, what Spawn looks like outside of the cape. That was
Yeah.
interesting,
Yeah.
right? It didn't occur to me to consider what that might look like. And this may not be canon that way, but it was interesting to see. So that was a good ending for me. But I get, at best for me, it's a read. I definitely wouldn't buy it because I don't get good vibes from the art,
Okay.
and I don't feel like it's a day in the life of Spawn. If you like Spawn, this is more Spawn. But I can't articulate for me what is it that should make me want to go rush to the next issue. Like, what did I really like about it? And it's hard for me to find that, other than the fact of the like for Spawn I already brought to this comic.
Yeah, I don't know if it's already out, but the graphic novel that or the trade paperback that will include this issue probably starts on issue 296, which is the history of Spawn Part 1. 297 is the history of Spawn Part 2. 298 sort of transitions from that into 299, which is the beginning of the next story arc.
Yeah.
Um, so I would recommend those ahead of this one.
Okay.
And the history of Spawn Part 1 and 2, those two issues give you pretty much everything you could ever need to know about Spawn. And then if you wanted to, obviously, jump back and read the details. But
I'll go to Barnes and Noble and just read the graphic novel
yeah, yeah.
with
But
your Starbucks coffee.
excellent cliff notes though, for sure. Those two
This
issues.
this speaks to a conversation we had. I'm not sure if it was on or off screen, where we were talking about Batman and how he is essentially doing more harm than good. He's perpetuating these characters or these villains and having them go back. Like he's beating them up, yes, and bringing them to Arkham, but they essentially break out and do more harm and kill more people. This Al Simmons, the Spawn, is doing the very same thing. His friend Mark is telling him and yells at him furiously about what he's doing. Uh, you seeking revenge is hurting the entire world because these players aren't just street thugs; they're on a global scale, and it it was really
Yeah,
interesting to me.
and
This is
so
why I picked this.
and then I could add salt to the wound here, because Matt already knows this. Spot fought hell. You hear something? Mine? Me?
Yeah, I think it's you.
Okay, so I'm gonna switch.
I think we're good. It sounds fine on my end.
Okay, sorry, I don't know how I did that, but so Spawn has fought hell in one, then he fought heaven in one, then he fought God in one. What else is there for him to do? Why are we still having Spawn books? There's nothing. Now he's going back and just fighting what? The Cabal? Right? He's already beat up everybody there is to beat up. And won.
So yeah, all right. In the most recent issues, we find out that there are other spawns that are showing up. So if you put Spawn on the level of being able to defeat God, now he has to fight himself in other forms, I guess.
I'm just saying, I feel like you already jumped the shark. You fought hell and won. Okay. I'm okay with that. And you start a new beginning. Then you fight heaven and you win. Okay, that's a bit much, but okay. Now what are you going to do, right? And then you fight God and win. When God is the source of all power, but somehow you can beat God. And the fact that you thought you even could. Where does your power come from if it's not God? And is there something bigger? But no, we're just going to keep it now. We're just back on Earth fighting other spawns and secret organizations. It's like, did any of those other books even matter? Or were we just jumping the shark to get to 300? Anyway, that's my pet peeve about Spawn. I apologize if I've offended you. Again, this book is, honestly, I would pass, but the books that came before that compel me to read it. I didn't really find it enjoyable, or I couldn't find what I say I like, because I really looked for that with each book. And I didn't really, except for that last panel. I like that. But, like you said, they could have told all this. Like Matt says, they could have told all this in 2 panels. I just didn't find the other stuff interesting or compelling. But you made a good point. That part about Spawn, you're always messing up, and every time you do this, you cause other people harm. That's a good point. And that adds a little more to make it kind of an almost read to it. But that's as far as I'll
All right.
All right.
Moving on to my second pick, it is the Twilight Zone. All right, and this issue in the Twilight Zone I picked was volume 5, issue number 12. This is the last issue of a 12-issue run, obviously, if it's issue number 12, and probably picking up with the same theme. I don't think you would have to read issues number 1 through 11 to enjoy this, but what did you guys think?
I'll let you go, Russ.
All right, good. All right, so in the beginning, it felt like a Twilight Zone story. Like some guy was trying to save someone who should be dead or did die, whatever. And I thought, oh, there's some time travel. There's something here, right? And that was interesting, right? And it looked at the guy that was saved, how the guy, because of he was saved, began to do great things in the world. But then that was just a loose thread because the guy that saved him in the first place, nothing else. No problem how he got there. Is there time travel? Just nothing. All that seems to me was this guy came out of nowhere to save someone who was originally going to die and saved him, and the world was made a better place. And there's the story of how different ways the world was made better because of the result of that sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't see the Twilight Zone part of it. Usually in the Twilight Zone, there's like a moral, and they do say something, right? But it doesn't, all it says was, people sacrifice for others, that sort of thing. But it didn't really give me the Twilight Zone flip. You know what I mean? Like, there's something here that you didn't see. There's a bigger conversation about, this time travel. Like if one of the people that he helped was one of those people that went back in the past to save him, I could have worked with that. That would have been a Twilight Zone. But that didn't happen. So you start telling the stories of these individuals and how they grew and how that as a result of this one person's sacrifice. And that's nice, but it, to me, does not a Twilight Zone story make. I found the art to be decent, not great, but it serviced the story well. But because Twilight Zone was on the cover, I expected something, some script flip that I didn't actually get. So I give it a read.
Yeah, so I'm similar to Russ on this one, but I think that the script flip is there not being one, right? So at least my interpretation, having not read the other 11 issues, just coming in at the tail end here, is that what the writer wanted you to think was subversive was the fact that somebody would act in a way that wasn't self-interested. That's the twist, right? That's the weird paradigm here. That's the Twilight Zone aspect of it. And I think it's more of a commentary on society in general, and it may just be that writer's perspective.
But then why make it so? Because right in the beginning, why make it so he was killed? Like, you didn't have to say that. If you want to talk about sacrifice, it could have been a random dude that says, I really believe in him, and sacrifice. It could have had that same effect. If you're actually, in the beginning, telling me there's time travel, and then doing nothing with it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm making an educated guess based on what I read.
For
everything
me,
else you say makes sense.
For me, that was all resolved by how it's wrapped up towards the end. The dialogue was the final report of an incident in Manhattan to be filed, cross-filed, and indexed by choices made, opportunities recalibrated, and sacrifices logged. The results made available not in corporate reports or in the scrutiny of shareholders, but in the fragile currency of the human heart. I think all of that is really, the change was made in the lives of the people, in the hearts of people. It wasn't like this huge impact. It did have a huge impact, but it wasn't so tangible as to be noted, other than the subtle differences in the people's hearts and experiences.
You can tell that. So here's the thing. You could have been, the guy who saved him could have been just the guy who was at the valor. Sort of believed in him. And then he sacrificed because he saw something. Right? You could tell that story with no time travel aspect, with nothing that get the exact same impact, right? So why throw in the time travel at all? It doesn't. It because you told the story as if that never happened, as if there was no time travel.
Yeah.
Right? If you made it so he knew somebody was coming after him because of his contacts, I could have worked with that too. Right? But no, you basically told me there was time travel. Right? There's got to be a reason for you to bring that up somewhere. There's got to be some payoff, even if it's just in the show notes at the end of the book.
Mm.
But it's not. Right? And that is my issue. Not the sacrifice, not everything that you like about the book. I agree with you. All those things are great, and I get the meaning, and I get the conversation there. But then why the time travel? Because when I watch Twilight Zone, you know I'm looking for a trick, right? And that's what Twilight Zone is supposed to bring.
Yeah.
Right?
What is the one thing that
Right.
is gonna fuck with my emotions or change my
Yes.
perspective?
And
Yeah.
and because if it wasn't a Twilight Zone book, if you just made it something that didn't have that in the title, I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah.
But you teased me with Twilight Zone, and it did not deliver. In my
And it
opinion.
may have happened in the first to 11 books that we haven't read.
But this book, all right, so unless you read the 11, I feel like if you're looking for that extra Twilight Zone pop, no, it's not that.
Yeah. I think the best thing about this issue is the very end, and I feel like that was kind of missing from the beginning too, because Rod Serling always introduced and ended the episode.
Mm.
This has the ending. We get his great monologue at the end or whatever, but the introduction of what it is, what's the setup, right?
Right.
So, like you're saying, Russ, you're expecting for it to mess with my emotions or to give me that twist or, change my perspective on certain things. The setup helps for that. So if this had Rod Serling's, here's a story of a guy that was living his life one day and whatever. If that had been set up prior, and we got the payoff at the end with the monologue, I think that would have improved this book immensely, for sure. But yeah, everything else that's contained therein is a good story.
And Straczynski.
Yeah, I mean it's a good.
Yeah, in the absence of that one thing, it's actually a decent story, and it feels good, and it's nice to watch, right? And all of that, the storytelling there is good. All of these, the connections, how it makes, all that is good. It's just that you gave me something in the beginning. You didn't give me my payoffs down. But everything else is good.
Yeah. I would say this is a solid read only because I didn't know that there were Twilight Zone comics. And I am a Twilight Zone fan, so I will check out some of these others. I like Dynamite too. I mean, they put out pretty good stuff most of the time. So
Dynamite has a movie that's out now. It's got Red Sonja, yes. It's got the Undead. It's got Red Sonja. It's got Vampirella and a whole bunch of them and zombies. But they do have a book, and they include what are those heroes that are that anybody can use now? What do you call that?
Project Superpowers is a good introduction to that.
Yeah, so Project Superpowers, those characters are in there.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts on our last book, The Twilight Zone, issue number 12? All right. So I did put a couple of links in the round table in the show notes, just sort of showing off the Eisner Award winners for 2020. A bunch of these books are free on Comixology or significantly discounted, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll probably put a link for that in the show notes as well if you want to pick up any of these online. We're not affiliated. We don't get any. We don't make any few cents off of your purchases, but if you can get comics a little cheaper, we're happy about that. So there's that. Do you guys have any thoughts on any of the winners here? Are there any categories in particular that stand out to you? Are there Um, I don't really see any books that we've necessarily read.
I have. I
Um,
see Black Hammer on here. I see books that I was going to bring. I see a few books that were already on my list.
okay.
Little Bird, which I did bring
Oh, you
also.
did, yeah.
So I like the fact that, and I'm sure you would have brought Usagi sooner or later if you haven't already have it for next week. So I wasn't even worried about that. So there are some things here, but I like the Black Hammer. Was there? There's a few Black Hammer issues actually, different volumes. So I've been reading that, and I kind of felt like I may not have. So it's interesting to see what makes the cut to win these things. I don't know if they are all that I would really read. Who was it that brought Afterlift? Is that you?
Have we done
Have we
Afterlift
done
yet?
Afterlift? I feel like we have. But again, we don't have a. These are all the ones that we've done before. We need to be looking at.
Yes. So that was a conversation that we had last week, and I think it's compounded by this week and some of the confusion in the show notes. We may be putting together a master list of all of the books that we've talked about on the show before, um, just for our own sanity and as well as being a good reference for the readers or the listeners.
Yeah.
So we'll probably get that hopefully this week or next week, get that put together and put up on the website. Um, yeah, I think the other two that I was really into or was interested in, other than Little Bird, like you mentioned, because we'd already had that on the show, were the ones that I brought this week. I feel like
Yep.
this whole year is kind of weird though. Like this didn't get the same pomp and circumstance that it normally does. I feel like I came across this one article. I was like, oh, here's the Eisner Awards. Okay, see you next year.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like there's usually a few more articles that sort of detail out particular books or things like that, highlight certain creators. Um,
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't feel the hype. I think I might have to go to another source. They may be too industry. Some people review movies. They're so deep into the movies that the ones that they like are the ones nobody likes.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
Right. I worry about that this may be too close to the comic book source. We really don't. Like, I actually have a relative that makes movies, indie movies, right? And a lot of her movies, she writes and shows what she thinks we should like. She doesn't care whether or not I actually do, but she knows what's best. And so sometimes it's a little too industry to decide what's. I'm always worried about even when we come up and say this is the best comics, this is a must read, or
yeah,
this is a classic, so you should read it. And I'm
Right.
always questioning that with you guys and even with myself. Saying just because this is classic and lauded as a classic doesn't mean it's actually a great read. Doesn't mean it's something you should own or have. So when someone says this is a classic and this must have you could say it's a classic Mustang, but would I really drive it now or no? Because that ride is terrible right now, right?
right,
It doesn't really, and I'm not that kind of person that would enjoy that one long seat in the front or anything like that, right? So I'm always worried about, and that's what I like about us is not only do we bring books that we like, but we have to sort of explain why we like them, right? And we
yeah,
have to, so that if someone can say, well, that's not a good enough reason for me and not follow. But we don't put it down like this is a classic, and if you don't like it, F you, you're not a good person. We don't really do that. So
yeah.
I like that.
Actually, looking into it, Afterlift was issue that Emmanuel brought on,
There you go.
and that was the one where the guys in the woman is driving the devil around.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember it garnering a not positive emotion about it, but that made it actually a decent book.
yeah, and it's probably the best Comixology original so far,
Yeah.
because their other stuff has not been all that good. Which coincidentally it won Best Digital Comic, I think. Um, all right, well, if there's nothing else, I think we'll wrap it up until next week, guys. If you are listening to us, you're probably listening to us on Spotify or Google Play or Apple podcasts. We
Or Twitch.
we appreciate you for doing that. You can find us on all of your podcatchers. We stream every Sunday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on twitch.tv/cornercomics. If you missed the show, you can always go to cornercomics.net and see the show notes for the episode. They usually go up same day, or we try to get it up same day. You can email us if you have any questions or you want to make comments directly to us. Maybe you want us to read something on the show. You can send that to cornercomicsofficial@gmail.com. As always, you can comment on YouTube. The archive goes up there. You can also comment on the website itself, as long as you have a Discuss account. Anything that I am missing or forgetting? Anything else you guys want to add?
Nope. You get it all.
All right.
Or if you agree or disagree with our picks, our personal opinions for the comics, if you agree or disagree, we'd love to hear that as well.
Yeah, I'm also waiting for somebody to say, hey, I miss getting the covers ahead of time because I like to read along with you guys. So if you're one of those people and you actually do want to read ahead of time so you know what we're going into in terms of the discussions, let me know. You can hit me up on Twitter at Berkoff, Berkough. So that is it for this week, though. Until next time, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure.
Later
Excelsior.
days.